I have done something that I thought was impossible. I have found the perfect gaming laptop. One that is slim and lightweight. One that doesn't sacrifice display quality for unnecessarily fast response times. One that looks sleek and professional, while still being fun and unique. And most importantly, doesn't cost an arm and a leg like its competitors. This is the ASUS Zephyrus G14 with AMD Advantage. Seriously, those reasons are why I have not moved away from my ASUS VivoBook, because I needed fast CPU performance and a high quality display for content creation. And while the performance is still excellent, and the display has not experienced any burn-in, in the last 2 years I have wanted more from it gaming wise. So when looking for laptops at around the £1,000 mark, and while there are some good discounts on the tough A16 and ROG Strix G15, the basic 100% sRGB and subpar DCI-P3 and Adobe RGB performance, the dim displays, the heft, and the design put me off from pressing buy on any of them. And then I saw the light at the end of a tunnel. The Zephyrus G14 is currently discounted down to £1,100 from £1,900, making it an absolute no-brainer. Let's take a look around the laptop. In terms of ports, on the left hand side we have the DC jack for the 240W power brick, HDMI 2.0B, USB 3.2 Gen 2 with 100W power delivery and display port via the integrated GPU, and headphone jack. On the right hand side we have two USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports, another USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port with display out via the dedicated GPU, and a microSD card slot. The USB ports will be updated to support USB 4 once the BIOS update comes out of beta. Yes, it's still in beta. Inside, there's quite a lot going on. The thing that stands out to me the most are the front firing speakers, which is a rarity on the laptops that I've used before. There are 4 in total, 2 being under the laptop as standard. However, what's not standard is the fact that the bottom firing speakers essentially act as subwoofers, but we'll talk more about audio later on. We also have the activity indicators for power, battery charge, and hard drive activity. What a blast from the past. Certain SKUs of this laptop have an RGB keyboard instead of white. I guess since I'm already talking about the keyboard, I personally don't love the typeface. It feels a bit too gamery for me, but it's not the worst I've seen. The typing experience on this laptop is like nothing I've ever felt on a laptop. Don't get me wrong, it's not a mechanical keyboard, but the typing experience feels really satisfying. The keys aren't as flat as on most chiclet keyboards, so there's quite a fair bit of travel, and I feel like typing on a sponge, but in a good way. As with other laptops, it feels like as soon as you put down a little bit of force, you're already down on the deck. Those dreadful Mac keyboards are the worst for it. We also have 4 programmable buttons for macros. The backlight on the keyboard is pretty uneven, I should mention. Of course, on the back, we have the anime matrix display. Look, is it a gimmick? Yeah, absolutely. Is it also cool? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a cool way to brand the laptop as your own and make it more individual. You can choose to have a single image or an animation. And you can either make your own or download custom ones from Armoury Crate. Below the anime display is the little ROG badge, which looks cool, but I could do without it because it ruins the clean aesthetic of the laptop. Honestly, if not for the typeface and the 4 exhaust fans, no one would be able to tell that this is a gaming laptop, and I absolutely love that. The build materials are solid, there's 0 deck flex around the keyboard for example, but the way that the paint has been applied makes it feel more like plastic than metal. I appreciate the satisfying thunk when you close the lid, and it passes the single finger test. The lid also folds under itself to allow the laptop to draw in more air from the bottom. Moving on to the display, we have a plastic bezel like on other ASUS laptops I reviewed, albeit a little thinner than before. But what's special is that embedded in the bezel we have an IR camera for Microsoft Hello, alongside 2 microphones. There is a third one on the back too, and in Armoury Crate, you can change the pickup pattern of the microphones, allowing the laptop to capture sound behind it. The display is one of the most important parts of the whole laptop, and I don't even know where to start. In terms of what makes it great for gaming, it's a 120Hz panel with 3 milliseconds input latency and adaptive sync. It also has a mux switch, which allows the dedicated GPU to drive the display directly, instead of it having to pass through the integrated GPU first, which typically causes a performance drop. In terms of what makes it great for content creation and consumption, it's 500 nits, it supports Dolby Vision HDR, it has 100% sRGB and DCI-P3 color spaces with Pantone verification and a factory color profile. And for productivity, it has a resolution of 2560 by 1600, and it is matte. As I said in the intro, I needed a display that's accurate for editing photographs or YouTube videos like this one. And it is generally hard to find a laptop in this price range that has one. So it really was the biggest selling point for me. So how actually is it? Well, it's brilliant. 1080p truly sucks as a resolution. Even on a small display, there just aren't enough pixels per inch. And even from a seeing distance, I could count pixels on my VivoBook. Viewing back my pictures feels incredible here, because you can see so much more detail without zooming in. And even something as simple as having crystal clear icons in my Windows taskbar, it's all very important. The display indeed, with its high refresh rate and low latency, feels fantastic to use. You don't always notice the high refresh rate in games, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but you always feel how much more responsive the game is, allowing for much more precise movement. And in terms of color accuracy, to the naked eye, I see no problems. The panel maybe isn't as saturated as the OLED VivoBook, but the colors look exactly as they should. The panel is mostly uniform. 3 out of 4 corners do shine a little bit more on full brightness, but you're not able to tell this unless you're looking at a black screen, and I'm impressed with the fact that black levels aren't awful here either. Probably the best you're gonna get without mini LED or an OLED panel. Speaking of which, the 2023 model does actually bring a mini LED display on board, so that may be something to consider. In terms of what's inside, my model has a Ryzen 7 6800HS with 16 threads and a Radeon RX 6800S with 8GB of VRAM. From what I'm able to deduct, this SKU has a 16GB of RAM soldered on, with an additional slot for an extra 16GB stick. Sadly, we are not able to go above 32GB of RAM, at least officially. The RAM is DDR5, clocked at 4800MHz. We also have a 1TB NVMe 4 drive on board that we can swap out, which you might want to, as the speed looks very Gen 3. I really wasn't expecting much of an uplift from my Ryzen 5 5600H, so I did some benchmarks. First up was rendering the previous Pocket Pixel video. And wow, I truly wasn't expecting such a massive jump. Being able to render a 4K video at less than real-time speed is nothing short of insanity. But it also does make sense, since the GPU is utilized when rendering videos. So I wanted to try a CPU-bound test. So here's the trademark Malik Racer Blender test, where I render a scene from a 19-year-old game in cycles with a bunch of lights around the scene. And the results make more sense here, it's not a massive uplift. Though it is still an improvement. I will get onto gaming in just a second, but hey, let's talk about audio. We have a smart amp on board, which supposedly helps with reducing distortion at higher volumes. We have Dolby Atmos for the built-in speakers and for headphones. Atmos for speakers adds a tuning profile that helps to boost the bass and add a tiny bit of widening without changing how the original song sounded. It's honestly a subtle effect. We also have EQ settings. Either you can use the intelligent ones, or you can create your own preset. I have mine set to detail as they always dull down the audio, though dynamic is also decent. It reduces the bass, but brings the voices forward with virtualization. Atmos for headphones is much of the same, and because of the so-called Atmos effect, the audio output from the headphone jack is some of the best I've heard. It really reminds me of the HTC 10 I own. The sound is clear and bright, but has a touch of bass that complements my Austrian audios, without ever feeling over the top. And the speakers? Some of the best I've ever heard on a laptop, full stop. Maybe even better than on a MacBook, though I don't have one on hand to compare with. Like mentioned previously, the treble comes from the top, directly at you, while the bass bounces off the surface that your laptop is propped up on. The bass output is high enough that you can feel the entire laptop vibrate, and the treble, because the top speakers are far away enough from the bottom ones, feels really distinct. Okay, let's finally talk about gaming on this gaming laptop. Firstly, I wanted to try some Xbox 360 emulation, because the VivoBook was able to handle it rather well, so I wanted to see what improvements I could make here. So how about Forza Horizon running at 60fps at 1440p? Big improvement over the 30fps 720p you get on the original console, and minus hitches from shader compilation, the game runs smooth. Another thing I was really excited to try is ray traced gaming, so here is Minecraft RTX. At 1050p with second to max ray trace settings, I could easily and consistently get over 30fps. Well, just about 30fps, in turbo mode no less. But still, it's playable. Portal RTX ran at about 1 to 3 FPS, likely due to Nvidia having some proprietary tech in the Remix engine that AMD can't tap into under the Vulkan renderer. BeamNG really benefits from the 8GB of VRAM, as it uses almost the entire amount. The actual performance was way better than I was hoping for at 1200p, but not perfect either. Easier to run maps run at above 100fps, even with AI traffic. The lowest dips I had on heavy maps were into the 40s, which with the FreeSync display you don't really feel. It does make a massive difference to both the Steam Deck and the VivoBook, where enabling AI traffic would either hard crash the deck, completely rebooting it, or on both devices crippling the frame rate, sometimes to single digits. Another game that I never got to experience in such a high fidelity is American Truck Simulator, where I can run the game at 1800p with 125% scaling, settings set to high, and play at around 90 to 120fps, depending on the intensity of the scene. Mafia 2 Definitive Edition, a game that is locked to 30fps on console, runs fantastic here on this laptop. With everything cranked up to high, at 1800p we are looking at an average of 74.4fps in the benchmark, which is a solid reflection of actual gameplay. If we were to turn anti-aliasing or resolution down, we could easily get a higher frame rate here too. In terms of thermals, let's just say you won't want to use this laptop on your lap while gaming. On silent mode, for day-to-day tasks, the laptop doesn't feel like a gaming one, as the fans hardly spin up and the deck feels nice and cool to the touch. But as soon as you put on performance mode, or even turbo mode, that's when you start to hear the fans and feel the heat. The GPU and the CPU run in the 80s and 90s respectively, tested in turbo mode, which is fine, it's just below the TJ max, but it's also not ideal and will mean thermal throttling in less than ideal situations. I'm gonna make a quick interruption in the script to talk about an issue that I've had with this laptop. So first of all, on the default Windows Update AMD drivers, I've had an issue where when I plugged the laptop into my TV, after about 30 seconds or so, it would hard crash. Either I wouldn't be able to move the mouse, although music would still be playing, or it would just blue screen and with a DirectX issue. So yeah, updating the drivers seems to have fixed that. However, a second issue I'm having is that while the laptop runs completely fine on the 4K 60Hz HDMI port of my TV, when I try to plug into the 120Hz port, it doesn't. It's not being detected by the TV, and when I go into duplicate mode on Windows, my mouse gets really choppy, and then if I just go back and switch it to the 60Hz port, I'll get a basic driver crash message from AMD. The battery life honestly kind of sucks. I say kind of because it really depends on if you're using the dedicated GPU or not. When I was doing some simple OBS recording, my battery dropped from 80% to 20% in about 25 to 30 minutes. I can get maybe about 2.5–3 hours of using the dedicated GPU for doing something as simple as script writing. However, when I use the integrated GPU, then Windows reports about 5 hours of use from 80%. So another issue that I have with this laptop is the fact that anytime you actually are on battery power and you want to not have to use the GPU, you can see there's just a bunch of random apps that are just using the dedicated GPU, so you have to stop them, which is probably not good. It's like I'm stopping Steam, for example. There we go, stopped it. This should disappear any second. And so it did, yeah. Just annoying, because just having the dedicated GPU, even if you're just doing nothing, really ruins the battery. 2-hour battery life, really? My god, does Armoury Crate suck. On paper it's great, it gives you access to all the special features of this laptop, but I spent days fighting it. Who knew that having a custom animation on the rear causes the laptop to not go into sleep mode? Thankfully, the onboard microcontroller does have some animations that I can play while in sleep mode, just not the ones that you've created or configured. But I did not realize this until day 2. Just like how I didn't realize that animations in sleep mode also extend to the keyboard on power light. The rain effect has a little thunderstorm on the keyboard, how cool is that? Speaking of sleep mode, the laptop is damn near instant to hibernate on battery power, like it's ASUS' solution to modern standby. The Armoury Crate software also gives me all these options for AuraSync, when this laptop has no RGB elements, and this whole UI seems to run inside of a web wrapper, which is not the most efficient either. And while there is no other ASUS bloat, thankfully, it did come with McAfee, which was the first thing I deleted. So is the Zephyrus 14 perfect? No. There are some pretty big downsides, like the bugs with HDMI, Armoury Crate, and sleep mode, plus the battery life feels like a downgrade from my VivoBook. But in every other way, this is a perfect laptop. Amazing keyboard, trackpad of a quality I'd come to expect from ASUS, and a high quality display, amazing audio output from the speakers and the headphone jack, and solid gaming performance. Oh yeah, and I suppose I haven't even talked about the price. This laptop retailed at £1,800, though I managed to snag it at £1,100. Can I talk about how hilarious that is? This same amount of money would get you a MacBook with 8GB of RAM and 256GB of storage, and of course no dedicated GPU. This laptop is an absolute no-brainer. Heck, even the VivoBook 16X I reviewed costs around the same, and that only had a 4GB 3050 and only one USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A port and one USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type C port, and unexceptional speakers. Plus, if 5 or so years down the line the GPU performance isn't up to snuff, I can always disable it and plug in an external one via the USB 4 port. So overall, I think you'll struggle to find a better gaming laptop at this price, so it's a hard recommendation for me. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below.